Welcome to Momtime. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker this morning. Tricia comes to us today with real-world experience of being a stay-at-home mom for 12 years. She is originally from Toledo, Ohio, where she was raised by a single mom who at times had to work 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Her childhood was unsettled as her mom had to relocate several times. She lived in Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, and Oklahoma. As a high school and college student, her life continued to be unsettled, which led to life choices and relationships that seldom ended well. However, things began to change when she recommitted her life to the Lord as a college student while living in Oklahoma. One of Tricia's deepest desires and prayers was, "Lord, I just want a normal life." After moving again with her mom to Georgia, she met her future husband, Tony. 2 years of dating led to a beautiful wedding, which led to the answer to her prayer, "Lord, I want a normal life." She was a stay-at-home mom married to a successful man who loved the Lord. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, a beautiful home in a cul-de-sac, a Toyota minivan, and a beagle named Maggie. Her life was textbook normal, but Tricia soon learned that normal was not easy. Matter of fact, she learned that normal was at times downright difficult, complicated, lonely, and even at times deeply depressing. She loved being home with the kids, and she loved her life, but sometimes she resented being at home. It was during this time that Tricia learned to lean into the Lord and find grace, wisdom, and strength for the normal that she so desperately wanted as a child. Tricia has a special heart for women, especially young women, and the unique challenges that face them. She currently works at Grace Fellowship Church, serving in administration, women's ministry, and guest services. She previously worked for Oconee County Schools in multiple capacities, including bookkeeping, information technologies, and with students in special education. Tricia and her husband Tony have been married 24 years, and they have 2 children, Taylor and Chandler, which are 22 and 19, both students at UGA. Go Dogs! So let's welcome Miss Tricia.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for being here. I remember being a mom of small children and how hard that could be to get out the door together, to get everybody ready, to make sure I had every pacifier, bottle, everything that you need that goes along with babies, and get somewhere. And you all look great. You don't look frazzled at all. So thank you for making it a priority to be here. I wish I had had something like Momtime when I was your age with small children. All that karaoke and axe throwing, that sounds amazing. I hope you guys will take part in that. But when I asked Kelly what she would like me to speak on this week, when she asked me to speak a few months ago, she said, she's so sweet. She said, just whatever you would like, and she gave me some choices. And I thought, well, let me see if I can ask some of the young moms in our church and see what they would like to hear about. So I took to social media and I began to ask the question, what would you like to hear about? And what would you like me to talk about? And some of the answers were, the first one was, will I always be this tired? No, you won't. You won't always be this tired. It feels like it's never going to end when you're in the middle of it, but you won't always be this tired. And the second one was, how do I balance my husband and my kids and marriage and my home and all of those things? It's a balancing act, and it's not easy. Another one was, how do I manage being overtouched? And this one I could so identify with. I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 love languages, but touch is not my love language. So when the girl responded with being overtouched, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so me. By the end of the day, Tony would come home and I'd be like, okay, just don't touch me. Just stay over there and we'll be fine. So that was a funny one. And another one was, how do I pray for my husband? Which is such a great question. Pray for him often. That's how you should pray for him, often. That's an easy answered question. And then, was that the last one? Oh no, this one. Do I still need to have sex, even when I don't feel like it? Yeah, I'm just gonna put a pin in that one and let somebody else talk about that when they come to talk to you. Because that's a big discussion for another day. But as I As I read all of the responses, and these were just a few of them, I thought it seemed that there was a common theme among them, and that was balancing young kids and marriage. And so today, that's what I want to speak to you about, is marriage and the importance of it. Because each one of these things is worthy of a talk all its own. But I want to focus on marriage. My memory of being where you were is twofold. It wasn't so long ago, but it was twofold for me. It was one, I got to be at home. What a huge blessing that is. So many women don't have that opportunity. They have to work for financial reasons or for insurance or because they're single moms. So I always thought it was a huge blessing to be able to be home with my children and get to experience all of the firsts with them. I got to expose them to so many new things, and I got to see them experience so many new things as a stay-at-home mom that a lot of moms don't get to do. But along with that privilege and blessing also came a sincere burden. I remember the days being long, really long sometimes. I remember the nights being short. It seemed like by the time my husband got home until it was morning would fly by sometimes. I also faced moments and days of feeling unimportant and great loneliness. I used to say that the four walls were closing in on me because that's how it felt a lot of times. So, and my husband, I almost would become envious of the fact that he got to leave. You know, it's like an escape for him, right? He got to put a nice set of clothes on. He got to get in his car by himself. That's huge. He got to write in silence, or he could listen to his own music. He didn't have to listen to, I don't even know what they listen to anymore. Einstein, baby Einstein, whatever. He didn't have to do any of those things. He got to have adult conversation all day. He got to go out for lunch with more adults and have adult conversations. And I found myself, I was at home. I was lucky some days to get a shower. I mean, let's just be honest. I was talking to some girls before, and they were talking about, when my husband gets home, I say, look, we all survived. We're all alive, so it was a good day. And I can remember feeling that way, but and wondering if anyone noticed, and is it worth it, this struggle and the balance of how wonderful it was at the same time. But I want you to be encouraged today that the Lord sees you, because I wondered, I just felt so alone some days, but I thought the Lord sees you. He sees you in your day in and your day out. The long days, those days that you don't get dressed, that you're still in your pajamas when your husband comes home, the days that the enemy speaks loneliness and darkness to you, the Lord is with you, and he sees you, and he's there for you. So don't feel like that you're all alone. I had a mentor call me during this time as I was feeling overwhelmed, and she said to me, Tricia, it won't always be this hard. She could hear in my voice that I was overwhelmed. And to hear that it was not going to always be this hard was such a relief to me, because at that moment when I was in it, it felt like it was never going to get better. So as she encouraged me with the fact that it's going to end, it will get better, I was relieved to hear that I wasn't feeling that and I was the only one, that it was completely normal. Priscilla Shire, I don't know if some of you might know who she is. She's a wonderful Christian speaker. She also speaks about a time in her life of feeling overwhelmed and unable to balance her life and her marriage and her kids. And she says she got up feeling overwhelmed one morning, and as she looked out the window, the Lord spoke to her. As she looked out, she saw flowers blooming. She heard birds chirping. The winds were blowing. And the Lord spoke to her and said, if I'm able to balance all of this, don't you think that I can help you balance your life and all that you have going on? I want you to hear that. He can help you. On those days that feel long and overwhelming, He can help you, and He's there for you. So I want us, we all believe that our marriage is important. And it's really, really important. Okay, would we agree? Would you all agree? Yes, it's very important. Because I'm at the stage where my kids are gone. They're pretty much gone. Taylor just moved back home, but they're pretty much gone. But, you know, when your kids go away to college and it's just you and your husband, if you haven't worked on that relationship, sometimes it's a struggle. There's a lot of people who get to my stage in life who genuinely have a hard time because they focused on their kids so much and haven't taken the intentionality toward their marriage that when the kids leave, they're looking at their husbands like, who are you? I don't even know you anymore. So I want us to really cultivate. I want you to really cultivate and work on your marriage during this time. And so in order to do that, you have to be intentional, right? Intentionality is important. So how do you bring intentionality to your marriage? I want you to think about when you were first married and it was just you and your husband. Some of you might have to think harder than others, but you did things spontaneously. You had time to do things on a whim. You would say, let's go out to dinner. Let's go to a movie. Let's go away this weekend. Let's do, different things. Just on a whim, you could do that. And you can't do that as much now that you have small children. So the things that happened before kids spontaneously were always good and fun. But once you have kids, sometimes the spontaneous things are not so fun, right? I'm thinking of like wet and dirty diapers happen spontaneously, right? Throw up happens spontaneously. The 24-hour bug, when it's coming out of both ends, happens spontaneously. The flu, spontaneously. So things that happen spontaneously when you have kids aren't necessarily the best thing. Other things that might happen spontaneously are backyard fires. No? That didn't happen spontaneous for you yet? Okay, well maybe it won't. But let me tell you about a spontaneous thing that happened when mine were little. So our son Chandler was probably around 5 or 6. And I think it was summertime. And I had gone inside with Taylor and I was in the kitchen doing lunch dishes. She was asleep upstairs. And Chandler was outside playing, his favorite thing to do. So I started hearing sirens. I'm thinking, that's a lot of sirens. Well, in runs Chandler. He comes flying in and he goes straight up the steps and he slams his door. I thought, that was weird. And the sirens are getting louder and louder. And so I dry my hands and I look out the back window and the woods behind our house are on fire. And here are the fire trucks coming and coming. Chandler, and I said, Chandler! And he comes running down. I'm sorry, Mommy. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I said, get in your room. So he goes to his room, and I'm calling Tony. I get my flip phone out, and I'm calling Tony. And they're starting to put the fire out. There's hoses, and there's trucks everywhere, y'all, and everyone's out of their house looking. And I'm standing on the porch, and of course I get his voicemail. And I said, do you hear those sirens? Your son has cut the woods. Yes, it was no longer our son. He was all of Tony's son. Your son has cut the woods on fire and I need you to call me. And I hang up. And he calls me, of course. And I answered and I said, babe, Chandler caught the woods on fire. I need you to come. And he's like, well, are the fire trucks there? And I'm like, yes, the fire trucks are here. Is everyone okay? Yes, everyone's okay. Great, well, can you take a picture of it for me? I hung up on him. He wanted a picture for a sermon, okay? He's always working on sermons. And usually we don't mind being apart, but that was not the time to ask for a picture. So not everything that happens when you have kids spontaneously. spontaneously is great, like the fire. Hopefully you won't have that happen spontaneously in your life. A lot of things that happen that are wonderful are planned and intentional. I want you to take for just a minute and think about the things that you plan. How many of you plan your meals? Some of you plan your meals. I know I have to plan my workouts. Some of you plan time to work out. I think that's so healthy. You plan weddings. You plan parties. You have to plan doctor's appointments. All of those things are intentional. You make time for them. You plan for them. And you do that because they're important. You had a plan to be here today. You all had to plan way in advance to be here today. And you did that because, well, one, because the food looks amazing, but also because this time for you is precious. You enjoy it. It's life-giving to you. And that is the same thing with your marriage. Your marriage is the most important relationship outside of Christ that you will have on this earth. And so I think it's time that you all, if you haven't, that you refocus your attention on your marriage. Now, I don't want you to hear in this already overwhelming time in your life that I'm going to give you one more thing to do, because that's not what I want you to hear. That's what the enemy would try to tell you, so you stop listening. But what I want you to hear, what I want you to think of, is just an alignment. Because a lot of times when we think of the word balance and balancing our lives, we think of giving equal time to everything. And I know there are not enough hours in your day to give equal time to everyone. It's not practical. But I want you to think of it more as an alignment, aligning your time and making a priority, and not just quality time with your husband, or quantity, but quality time with him. I believe that we say our marriage is important, so bringing intentionality to our marriage. When it comes to finding a healthy balance in our marriage, it takes planning too. Just like all those other things that you have to plan to be intentional in your marriage. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4 says, "Farmers who wait for perfect weather will never plant." If you're waiting for the perfect time in your life to work on your marriage or to focus on your marriage, it's not going to happen. If you say, "No, I'm just so busy right now, I'm just going to wait until the kids are out of diapers," or "I'm going to wait till they're all in school because then I'll have time," or "I'm going to wait till they're all driving," or it's not going to happen. We have to make our marriage a priority, and in order to do that, we have to plan and prepare and be intentional. So what does intentionality look like? That's a good word, but how do we apply it? How do we make it happen in our lives? I'm just going to give you some examples, 3 examples of the way Tony and I do it. And I'm not saying this is how you have to do it. I just know for me, hearing ideas is helpful because I'm not the most creative person. So hearing what other people do, there's no shame in stealing ideas on stuff like this. So just want to give you some ideas. And the first one is our front porch. We made it a priority when the kids were little especially, and I was home all the time, to once a week or twice a week, we have 2 wicker rocking chairs, and we've had them for years, and I'm not getting rid of them because I love them. We would go out there and sit together without the kids, without the phones, no distractions, just he and I, and we would have a conversation. We would share about our day, the difficulties of it, the challenges of it, the great things that happened in the day, just he and I. And there were times, now we all know that men and women are created differently. Equal, but different. Would you agree? We hear different, we talk different, we communicate different. So there were times when we would go out there. God created our husbands to be problem solvers. They are fixers by nature. It's just what they do, which is wonderful, and we need that. But there were times when we would go outside and I would have to say, honey, I don't need you to fix any of these problems. I just need you to listen, right? Because sometimes they just want to interject and they want to tell you how you should have done it or could have done it or would have done it. And I just needed him to listen. Because, I have so many words that I have to use in a day. And a lot of times when I'm home with my kids, I don't get to use them all. So he got to use all his words while he was at work talking to all the adults. So when he got home, I just needed him to listen to me. And so like I would preface it and say, can you just listen to me? And he would do that. And there were times, especially as men, they don't like to talk, right? They've used all their words at work, and by the time they get home, they don't want to talk. So we would go outside and he would say, can we just sit together quietly? Can you just be here with me? And let's not talk about anything. And so it's a give and flow, but there was that time that we knew as the kids got older, we would say, look, we're going on the porch for 20 minutes. Unless someone's bleeding or dying, do not come outside. Just to have that time together. And it not only showed him that he was important to me, it showed my kids that relationship and that my husband is important. And we modeled it for them, how to do that. So that was one thing. The second thing we did was we made it a priority to be in church. And you would say, oh, well, your husband's pastor, you kind of have to be there. But we made it a priority to be in church together. First of all, there's free quality childcare. You get to come and leave your babies with people who will love them and teach them about the Lord, and you get to be alone with your husband, not alone, together with your husband, and you get to learn about Christ, you get to worship him, and you get to grow together and have that time. You could get it. We used to get in the car and talk about the sermon and how the Lord spoke to him and how the Lord spoke to me, and we grew together because we went to church together. So I hope that that's one that you will adopt if you don't do that already, is find a church and go there. Also, when we have so many, I'm sure your church does as well, so many small groups. We have small groups on Wednesdays and Sunday mornings and that meet during the week who are people just like you, moms and dads with kids who are struggling, who are having a hard time. Sometimes that's the best thing you can do is be around other people who are facing the same challenges or who've gone through the same challenges as you, so you can encourage each other. And then the third thing, and this is a really common one, you all heard this, a date night. So true how important it is to get away, just the two of you. Tony has a hobby of planning trips. He just enjoys doing that. So he made that a priority early in our marriage to plan a trip. And we would go away once or twice a year. We would get out of town for the weekend. And sometimes you can't do that, and I completely understand. But you can go to botanical gardens. You can walk around at the botanical gardens. I think you can get it for free. You can go to a park and be together. You can go to the mall and be together. You can go sit in the car somewhere and be together for free. So don't let the enemy tell you there's not enough. We can't afford to go on a date night. You may not be able to afford to go on a trip out of town, but there's something that you can do together to make each other feel important and valued. So make time for a date night. And while you're on the date, if I can just encourage you, try not to talk about the kids. Don't you love when you get together with someone and they spend the whole time talking about somebody else? That's how our husbands feel sometimes, when all we talk about is our kids. And we love our kids and they're valuable, but you know what? My husband wants to know that he's valuable. And if I spend the whole time talking about my kids, then it's telling him that he's not as important as my kids. And I don't want him to hear that. I want him to hear how important he is. So I try to focus on that. I know that's hard and challenging because right now kids are your life, but try not to talk about them the whole time you're on the date. So this is what I want to leave you with, finally, at the end here. We all long for one thing in life, and that is to be known and to know. And that is intimacy. Now, when I say intimacy in your marriage, I know immediately we all think I'm going to talk about sex, and I told you I put the pin in sex. I'm not talking about it. But what I want you to think about is being intimate with your husband. I heard a minister say it like this one time. He said, intimacy is into me you see. So intimacy means that you see into me and I see into you. I want to encourage you to invite your husband back into your life. Some of you feel maybe you've just shut him down. Maybe you've put up walls. You feel like he doesn't understand you and he doesn't get you, and that is a difficult place to be because your husband is your partner and he wants to help you. How many of you would say that you knew everything about childbirth before you had your baby? Everything. You got in there and you said, yeah, that went exactly like I thought it was gonna. No. No matter how many stories you heard about childbirth, no one could prepare you for birthing a baby. Nobody. You had to experience it on your own. How many of you knew how hard it was going to be a stay-at-home mom? None of you. None of you knew how challenging it was going to be. And the same is true with your husband. He does not understand how hard it is for you to be at home and the difficulties that you face and the lies that the enemy speaks to you day in and day out. But if you tell him, he'll have a little bit better understanding of how hard it is and how challenging it is. But you have to let him in. You have to invite him in. You have to verbalize those things. We think that they just naturally going to get it, and they're just not. They can't. Just like you couldn't fully understand how difficult and hard childbirth and motherhood was going to be until you experienced it. Some scriptures I want you to think about when you're trying to be intimate, trying to invite him back in and be honest with him, is Matthew 6:33. It says to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. If you seek Christ first, he will help you do these things. Amen. James chapter 4 tells us to ask. It says we have not because we ask not. It was a popular thing this new year to have a word. Did y'all see, has anyone seen that? Like, my word for this year is faith, and my word for this year. And I thought, I couldn't get a word. And I thought, I need a word. Everyone else has a word. Well, the Lord finally told me ask was my word. I'm just not good at asking. I'm not good at asking for help. I'm not good at asking for advice or asking someone to give me their opinion on things. So my word is ask, and it was this verse that he took me to, that I have not because I ask not. So those things in your life that you need, have you spent time asking for them? Have you asked God for them? And if you have, keep asking. Keep asking. He is faithful to help you, and he wants to help you if you will ask. And your husband is also someone who wants you to ask. Sometimes they don't help us, but it's because we haven't asked them to. You know, I heard a lady say one time, she was in the kitchen, she was making this big meal, and her husband came in and he said, what can I do to help you? And she said, can you stir the beans? You know, she had like pots everywhere and all the burners on, everything going. And she said, can you stir the beans for me? And so he stood there and just kept stirring the beans. And she's like, how do you see all of this stuff going on and not know other ways to help me, right? Have y'all been there with your husband? I have. I'm like, okay, I told you to stir the beans, but now can you turn the oven off, or you hear that beeping, can you make it stop? all of those things going on, but sometimes they just don't see them. So ask the Lord for help, and ask your husband for help. Ask, and he will answer. Before we get to the table talk questions, I want to encourage you. When I used to work, I would go into the lunchroom with all the other women for lunch, and before long it just would start to get catty and negative about husbands. And so I don't want the enemy to try to come into your conversations today as you sit around the table and talk about your marriages and your husbands. As you look at these questions, I want you to focus on what I talked about being intentional and being intimate with him again and allowing him in and asking for help and calling upon the Lord. Okay? Don't let the enemy come in and steal what the Lord is trying to speak to you today. At the end of now that Tony and I are reaping the benefits of intentionality that we sowed early in our marriage, we're reaping that benefit now that our kids are gone. We planned and we were intentional for 20 years. And now that our kids are gone, well, one of them's still home, she came back, but we still know each other. We still like each other. We enjoy being together. And that is so important. Some people get to this stage of their lives, like I talked about earlier, and they're alone with their husbands again and they don't know them. And I really don't want that for you in your marriage. Because if you're intentional now, your marriage can thrive with prayer, with time, and intentionality. The Lord will help your marriage to be a blessing to you. Can we pray? Can I pray for you? Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for all these moms, Lord, who made a plan to be here today. I pray that this time was an encouragement to them. I ask as we go into table talk, Lord, that you would be the focus and the center of that time, that the women today, Lord, would be encouraged. They would cry out to you for help in their marriages, especially those who need it most, Father. They would cry out to you that you would give them creative and fun ways to be intentional with their husband, Lord, that you would make a way where there seems to be no way in some of these marriages, Father. But I pray also, Lord, that they would be reminded that their husbands are a blessing, Father, that you gave them to each other to help each other through life. And I pray that they would lean into that and be encouraged this morning. And we thank you for it. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.